Good morning, Alive. Let's try it again. Good morning, Alive. Out. What are you doing in these hot days? The pool? What about over here? Nothing. That's about right. And one over here? Grand Haven. Okay, I've been in the pool, and I've also been doing nothing, just laying on the couch like this with a fan waiting for it to cool down. All right, I have the honor and privilege of introducing our teacher today, who happens to be a very good friend of mine and my coworker at Campus Ministry. So Ben, come on up here. Everyone, this is Ben Post. He is fantastic. He is a dad, a husband, a friend, a son, and the king of high fives. I would encourage you to get a high five from him if you're not afraid of your hand being sore afterwards. But everyone, give it up for Ben Post.
Well, thank you, Noelle. Well, good morning, Alive. It is an incredible honor to be with you guys here this morning. As Noelle said, my name. To help you get to know me a little bit, here's a picture of my family. Is that right? 15 years? 15 years. And we still love that, so that's good. Jaden is 10, and he loves art, coloring, drawing. He loves music, hip-hop dancing. He really loves Nerf gun wars right now. Eli is 6.5. The half is very important right now. And he loves all things sports, so basketball, baseball, soccer, you name it. And for those of you that care deeply about four-legged furry friends, that's Boaz. Stacy and I are on staff with Campus Ministry at GVSU, and we get to work with an incredible team of staff. You can go to the next slide. Here's a picture of the staff from this past year. Noelle is also on the team, and we just have this unbelievable privilege of walking with and loving on and caring for students at Grand Valley. I want to give just a real quick update about a few things that's going on at Grand Valley, and then we'll dive into the text together this morning. Go to the next slide. We do a weekly worship gathering on Sunday nights called The Well, and so here's just a few pictures. You can go to the next slide. This is what the Sunday night in the Cook DeWitt Center in the middle of campus looks like. One more slide. Okay, you can stop there for now. There's about 400 students between the Allendale campus and the downtown campus currently who worship together on Sunday nights. God continues to move powerfully in that space week after week after week. I leave that building on Sunday night and I walk to my car and I just think it was such a gift to be in this space with these people, because it was like God did something there. It wasn't just we were just checking off this box and trying to show up. Like God was doing these things. But our goal is not just to get a bunch of people to gather in a room together on a Sunday night. The heartbeat of who we are and what we do is leadership development. Go to the next slide. A big focus of our ministry is discipling leaders who make disciples. This is our team of student leaders from this past year. They serve in a variety of leadership teams. Some are on the music team, like Drew and Olivia were here leading worship this morning as well. They serve on the music team at Grand Valley, or a productions team, or a worship planning team, or a life group leader that are in Bible studies this year at Grand Valley. Hundreds of students are having life-changing encounters with Jesus at GVSU. I wish I had time to tell you countless stories. There are so many stories of what God is doing there. I just want to say on behalf of the Campus Ministry team, thank you, Alive. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your prayers. You guys financially, just so grateful for you, and we need them. We need your prayers, and we need your support. Let me say a prayer. Jesus, thank you for the gift of this time and the space to be together here this morning. It's Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. Many in this room we just kind of go in this habit of we are here. This is what we do. We go to Alive on Sunday morning. But God, I just pray that this morning you will tune our eyes, our ears in this space. something that you want to do in our hearts. God, I pray that something that happens this morning could be life-changing for somebody. Not because my words were special, but because you, the King of the universe, you are here. And so, Jesus, I just pray that your voice will be loud and clear. Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening. Amen. Okay, we're just going to dive in together this morning. Are you ready? We're going to look at a lot of different verses. They're going to be up on the screen as well. Go ahead on the next slide. Okay, so Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. He says, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." This verse is loaded with implications for us and the church. I think of this verse when I think about why and how we are discipling our student leaders. Am I really following Paul's example and calling others to do the same? This morning, what I want to do is I want to take a little bit closer look at Paul's life. He was obviously a force in the early church, planting churches and writing letters and giving it everything he had for Jesus. One of his favorite metaphors that he used in his letters to describe his own faith journey was running. All right, you can go to the next slide. Are there any runners in the room? Anybody run a 5K in the last, ever in your life? How about that? You've ever ran a 5K in your life? Okay, in the last 10 years, 5 years. We got some runners in the room. That's awesome. I like to run, okay? I'm not a great runner. I'm not a fast runner, but I like to run. A couple years ago, God gave me an incredible gift of a few friends, and we run together every Friday morning. I live in Holland, and it's 3 other pastors, and we run together every Friday, usually between 7 and 10 miles every Friday. Okay? And we do this every single Friday all year round. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but there were some brutal days this past winter, and there was one particular Friday morning. It was probably 0 degrees and 25-mile-an-hour winds. Everything was closed. Every school in the state of Michigan was shut down. Even several businesses were closed, but it was Friday morning, and so we ran. Here's a picture of us afterwards. It was a good time. I don't remember how many miles we put in. Probably was not 10 that day, but it was this past Friday. It was very different weather, and we still put in our miles on Friday. While we run, we talk about life. We talk about faith. We talk about our families. We talk about ministry. We talk about politics. And we do it while we care for each other and we run together. During Paul's life, running took place in a stadium. Every major Greco-Roman city in the ancient world had a stadium for races and other competitions. Most of them are not very well preserved archaeologically. One of them has been found in a city called Aphrodisias. You can go to this map. Aphrodisias is a city, it's not mentioned in the Bible. It's about 90 miles to the east of Ephesus and about 25 miles southwest of a city called Laodicea. Aphrodisias has one of the largest stadiums that they have found. Go to the next slide. Here's the stadium in Aphrodisias. Capacity is about 30,000. It's one of the best preserved stadiums, one of the largest. I know it's not Spartan Stadium, and I know it's not the big house, right? But 30,000, it was an enormous capacity in the ancient world. And this thing is 295 yards long. It's like 3 football fields. This is a picture of a stadium, and races and running took place in stadiums during Paul's life. Now, I hear you guys did a series about running or something like that. There are a few passages together this morning where Paul uses this running metaphor to describe his faith journey and I want to talk a little bit about its implications for our lives together this morning. In Paul's first letter, his first letter was to the people in the Galatians, okay? So he's recounting a little bit of his own journey. He goes up to Jerusalem, and he's meeting with the elders there, and he says this in Galatians chapter 2. Then, after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem, this time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation and meeting privately with those esteemed as elders. I presented to them the gospel that I preach among the Gentiles. I wanted to be sure that I was not running and had not been running my race in vain. So in Paul's first letter, he basically says, hey, I'm preaching the gospel to everybody, and I just want to make sure I'm not running my race in vain. Okay, that's verse number 1. Later on, Paul had spent 3 years doing life and ministry in the city of Ephesus. He visited a number of other cities after he left Ephesus. Then he came back, and he wanted to have one final conversation with the church elders that were in Ephesus. Paul now knows it's near the end of his life. It's kind of the last conversation he's having with the elders of that church. He's poured into these guys for years, and this is what he has to say in Acts chapter 20. And now, compelled by the Spirit, I am going to Jerusalem, not knowing what will happen to me there. I only know that in every city the Holy Spirit warns me that prison and hardships are facing me. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. What would it take to say something like that? Paul says, come what may. And I know what's coming isn't going to be easy. I consider my life worth nothing to me if only I may. My only goal is to finish the race and complete the task, telling people about Jesus. Nothing else matters. Paul leaves the Ephesian elders and he heads towards Jerusalem. While he's in Jerusalem, after he has this conversation, he gets arrested. He's arrested in Jerusalem. He eventually gets shipped off to Rome. We don't have time to get into the details of all the story, but while he's in Rome, while he's arrested, he eventually pens his final letter. It was a personal letter, one that he wrote to a guy named Timothy. And he uses this running metaphor one more time. In 2 Timothy, he says this, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." So those are 3 verses there. Quick review. The first letter in Galatians, he says, I just want to be sure that I'm running my race well. And then when he's meeting with the Ephesian elders for the last time, he says, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only goal is to run and finish the race. And then in his final letter, he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. Paul is saying, this is who I want to be. I want to live and run for Jesus and his gospel. And he did it in such a way where at the end of his life, he could say, I gave it everything I had. This is such a powerful metaphor for Paul and his faith journey. But this metaphor wasn't only for Paul and his life. Listen to what Paul says to the Jesus followers in Corinth. By the way, not only did Corinth also have a large stadium, this city held the Isthmian Games, Isthmian, Isthmian Games, okay? Now, the Isthmian Games were not quite as big and famous as the Olympics, but you get the idea when I say that word, right? The Isthmian Games were a festival of athletic and musical competitions, and they were doing these things in honor of the sea god Poseidon. The winner's prize? A crown of dry, wild celery. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Pretty motivating. In the Isthmian Games, only the person who finished first got a prize. There was no silver and bronze. There's no participation medals for everybody like we do nowadays, right? Only the winner got the grand prize. I think it's very probable that these games were held in Corinth when Paul was staying in Corinth. Listen to these words from Paul to the people who wanted to win a crown of dry, wild celery. 1 Corinthians 9. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a celery crown that will not last, obviously. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Here in 1 Corinthians, Paul is saying, I charge you, I invite you to come and run like this with me. This is the metaphor. It's not just for his own life. It's a metaphor for the believers in Jesus. Friday morning runs with Paul would have been pretty interesting. Run in such a way as to get good life choice or not, but I did. I met with a personal trainer who created a great training schedule for me. Run this many miles this day, this many miles this day, do cross-training like this day, and rest this day. And I followed it very, very closely for 4 months. And like everything about the life choices I was making was honestly, that's not going to help me run my marathon. No to that cake, and yes to this, and no to that. Even other coworkers were like, wow, he's taking this thing really seriously. And I was. I wanted to run the race as best as I possibly could. It was one of the hardest things I ever did. But in the end, I did get that participation medal, so that's good. That experience also, much more importantly, that experience taught me a lot about running the only race that really matters. So now I want to ask the question again. Do we have any runners in the room this morning? Anyone here want to live their life in such a way where it's obvious that we are training and preparing and running with a purpose and a passion for Jesus, not for a celery crown? Sometimes it's hard to tell if Christians are even going for a walk. Look, I hesitate to use this metaphor. I think this metaphor is helpful. You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be a great, physical, actual runner. It's a metaphor, right? You don't have to be the loudest. You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to get a job in full-time ministry. But are you giving it everything you've got? Paul says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Are we following his example? Does our life look like this? Are we trying to run like Paul? I want to take this run. I'm taking the liberty to do this. This is not really explicitly in the text. Not only are we to run the race with everything we've got, but this race that we're in, it's actually a relay race. when Paul met with the Ephesian elders one last time in Acts 20. And when he wrote that letter to Timothy, Paul knew the end of his time was coming. And he was saying to the elders in Ephesus, it's your turn. You run. And he's saying to Timothy, I've run my race. I have finished my leg of the race. It's your turn. You run. In a relay race, you run your leg of the race as best, as fast, as everything you've got as you can, right? The most crucial part of the race is in the transferring of the baton. If you drop or you mishandle the transfer, the entire race is in trouble. What does this look like for us, metaphorically speaking? I want to show you a picture of my boys. Again, Jaden and Eli. What does this look like as a dad? How do I pass the baton well to them? They don't have to be pastors. They don't have to do college ministry. That's not my goal for them. But how do I intentionally think about what does this look like in their lives? I want to run with everything I've got, but I also have to make sure that I'm passing the baton well to them. I have the privilege of bringing them to school every morning. I almost said every Friday, but every morning. So every morning when I'm bringing them to school, we have a brief conversation about what's important. It's not, you got to be the smartest. It's not, you have to be the coolest. It's not that you have to be the fastest. It's not that you have to be at the best of whatever. Jaden, Eli, what's the most important thing? Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is the thing that's the most important. So every single morning we review this. Eli, what's the Hebrew word? Jaden, what's the Hebrew word? Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta is a Hebrew word for love God and the Hebrew word for love your neighbor. So we summarize it by just using that one Hebrew word every morning. Anyway, doesn't matter. It does matter to me, but not to you, maybe. But then after school, right, we talk about it. How was school today? When I ask that question, I don't just want to know, what did you do in art? Yes, I also want to know what you did in art, but I want to know, how did or didn't you love your neighbor? How did it go? What did you say when that person said that rude thing to you? What does this look like? How are we passing the baton to the next generation so that they too can run with everything they've got? You can go to the next slide. I want to know, what does this look like for you? What does this look like for your family? For your grandkids? Jack. What does passing the baton look like? What does it look like here at Alive for your church? Are we needing more volunteers for the kids program, kids ministry? Maybe you don't like kids. It's not your thing. I like my kids. I don't love everybody else's kids. That's true for me. Maybe kids isn't your thing. What about high school or middle school? Are they still needing help? Are they needing volunteers? Are they needing more godly people who have been running the race and saying, here, let me help you run the race well too? What does it look like to pass the baton to the next generation? But my life is constantly passing the baton to the next generation and encouraging them to come and run too. And I want them to give it everything they've got as well. In campus ministry, the staff are the coaches, essentially, and the student leaders are the players. And we try really hard to coach and train and equip and disciple our leaders, and then we actually give them leadership opportunities. We're not just doing ministry for them, we're trying to do ministry with them. I'll tell you one story. Every year we do spring break trips. You can go to this picture right here. We do spring break trips with students. Our trips are all student-led. This year we sent 200 students on spring break trips, 14 different trips all over the United States and Latin America. I was assigned to go on the mystery trip this year. Only the student leaders knew where the mystery trip destination was. I literally did not know where I was going or what I was doing until I arrived in Nashville, Tennessee. The first night we got in Nashville, and I was having a conversation with our host ministry site person. His name was Kevin. And Kevin's like, okay, you are clearly the oldest in the group. But you're trying to tell me that you are not leading this trip. Talk to me about this. So we had a brief conversation about okay, so here's how campus ministry works. We have the staff, and the staff are trying to intentionally pour into and disciple the leaders, and these student leaders then help try to reach out to and pour into the rest of the students on campus. And so when we come to spring break trips, we decide the staff don't actually have to lead these. We want our student leaders to lead them. And he's like, wow, that's kind of amazing. I'm like, yeah, I know. We have 200 students that are out right now on 14 different trips, and the students are leading all these things. And he goes, that's a lot of people on trips. You guys ever have any issues on your trips? I'm like, oh yeah, of course we have issues on our trips. Last year, one of the vans hit a deer, and a few years ago, one of the trailers came unhitched from the van while it was driving down the highway. That was pretty scary. And he's like, no. I'm talking about issues. You ever have leadership, integrity, character issues on your trips? I had to sit there and think for a minute. No, that was solid. That was a good year. That was a good year. I've been there since 2009, and I was trying to go what that I can think of. All of the logistics, and this student is having a meltdown, and this leader is caring for this person well, and they led with such spiritual depth. And then after a few days, I realized, oh boy, there's a problem that's happening here with our host site. And there are some things that they're doing that are not working well. And I'm feeling this frustration and this tension, and I'm like, I gotta figure it. We can't do it like this anymore. Wait, no, I can't fix it. How do I help the leaders? How do I help the leaders have this conversation so that we don't do this anymore? I literally am having this conversation in my head, and I walk down the hallway, and I turn around the corner, and there's the leaders sitting down, having an intentional conversation with the host about the thing that I was worried about. They were a step ahead of me. This is what it's like to intentionally pass the baton to the next generation. Friends, we are called to run the race with perseverance and with passion. And we are to run our leg of the race with everything we've got. We are also called to carefully pass the baton to the next generation. It might be your kids here at Alive, your grandkids. It should involve investing your time, your energy. It might also be a financial investment. What does the church budget look like for the next generation? I can ask that question. Terry's not here. How are we investing relationally or financially in discipling the next generation? The most crucial part of the race is transferring the baton. We cannot, as a church, we cannot afford to mishandle or drop the baton in the most important race that matters. And it's not for a crown of salary. Please pray with me. Jesus, help us hear your voice, who hear your call. Help us to listen to the words of Paul and follow in his example. Help us to be people who run the race with perseverance and with passion. Help us to be these people who are training and intentionally pouring into you and your word and the people around us. May it be evident to the people that we encounter that we are trying to be people who give it everything we've got. They know that we're training for a marathon by the choices we're making, because it matters to us. Every piece, every detail matters. So Jesus, help us run well. Not because we are good or disciplined or strong or fast, but because you're kind to us. Help us to run well. And Jesus, I just pray right now for the next generation. Jesus, we give them to you. We give our kids to you. We give our grandkids to you. God, we give the kids ministry and the youth ministry here at Alive to you. God, we just pray that you will raise up a next generation of leaders who love you, who care deeply about this race, who care deeply about sharing the gospel wherever they go and whoever they meet. God, I pray that the next generation of leaders will step up and it'll be evident that they love God with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their might. And may the church be known for loving their neighbor as themselves. Jesus, forgive us for the ways that we have taken this job not seriously. The ways we're just kind of going for a walk or walking aimlessly. God, help us to be more disciplined. Help us to think carefully and intentionally about how we are passing the baton.